and cats, which is
technologii prorozwojowych. Jest to temat bardzo ciekawy i też myślę, że w wielu krajach szeroko dyskutowany, również w Polsce, także bardzo eksplorowany. I oczywiście klastry też się ściśle z tym tematem wiążą,
Clusters are closely connected with that
kierują
topic
swoją
because
ofertę do przedsiębiorców, czy przedsiębiorcy
direct
grupują się
their
wokół danych
offer
obszarów
to
gospodarczych
enterprises
albo
or
technologicznych.
entrepreneurs or
Wydaje się,
entrepreneurs
że
focus
właśnie
on
klastry
some
i tematyka
areas
CATS-ów
or
albo
economic areas. So it seems that CATS and smart specializations
przy okazji klastrów.
are somehow interlinked, and
tutaj będą Państwo mieli prezentacje,
smart specializations should be discussed together with CATS. So maybe
zapraszamy wszystkich.
we should first invite everyone onto the stage. So the panel will start with brief introduction by Justyna Gorzoch, who is representative of the Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Technology. So in a moment I will ask Justyna to come here on the stage, and then I'd like the panelists to take their seats. Marek Wasilewski is waiting here, so he is expert on innovative companies and who will be the moderator of the conference. So let me now ask Wilma Purienę, Anu Manikam, Marek Świeczkowski, Tomasz Nasiłkowski.
I tak, to już Państwo, rozumiem, będą się przedstawiali.
I understand you will introduce yourselves, so I won't now waste time.
Dobrze, teraz poproszę Justynę Gorzoch o
So now Justyna Gorzoch, please make a brief introduction to the topic.
Dzień dobry Państwu, Justyna Gorzoch.
Good morning, it's still morning. Ministry of Entrepreneurship and Technology. I'm responsible for national smart specialization, and I will try to introduce you to the topic briefly. I'm not sure you see the letters, but let me start with what NSSs are. These are R&D and innovation areas identified by countries and regions which are to show endogenous development potential of entrepreneurs. They're identified by stakeholders themselves, representatives of science and business, in order to show actual interest of market in specific innovation areas. Identification of national and regional smart specialization was the ex-ante conditionality for new financial perspective, where each of the member states and regions had to identify such regions in order to obtain financing. So to remind you, TO1 under Smart Growth operational program, Poland was granted 6 billion euro, and the regional operational programs 2.2 billion euros. What is characteristic for smart specialization in Poland is the fact that we have two levels of support. We have the national level and the regional level, where each of the regions, local authorities, establish their own process of selecting specializations. They have own specializations, and financing comes from 16 regional operational programs. The objective of identification of smart specialization was to increase private spending on R&D activities and increase thematic concentration on specific topics. So it was, the idea was not to distribute public funds across all areas. The process of arriving at smart specializations, according to the process of identification, was entrepreneurial discovery. We have launched this process in 2011, commissioning the analysis of technological foresight of industry, and we wanted to
te obecne i te przyszłe
point
trendy
to
rozwojowe
potential
oraz
areas, development trends and
na pierwszym
niches.
etapie
At the first
skrzyżowaliśmy
stage,
wyniki,
we have cross-examined the results of technological foresight with existing national research program.
Kolejnym etapem
The
identyfikowania
subsequent stage of identification of SSs was to perform statistical analysis, to analyze the statistical data, and to perform qualitative analysis where we looked at different indicators where the potential was substantial, when there was a lot of R&D expenditure, where the export was highest, and we looked at innovative projects and activities of clusters. Then we cross-analyzed the analysis performed before, and it turned out that 99 technologies had a potential. Then we had a series of meetings, interministerial meetings, meetings with regions, meetings with business community, where we tried to take a decision where the potential really was. And as a consequence, we pointed to 20 R&D priorities, which were then presented as an annex to the program for development of enterprises. The entrepreneurial discovery process is still alive, and it's open, and it's about updating the areas in terms of changing environment and potential. We conducted such an update last year, and we now have 17 NSSs. So this slide shows the first part of the identified areas. Finally, we have 5 sections which represent entire economy and social areas. The first part is healthy society, biomedicine, clinical trials, bioeconomy, second large part, food and agriculture and food economy, biotechnology and chemical processes. Another part is sustainable energy generation, low-emission energy industry, renewable energy sources, sustainable construction, and environment-friendly technologies. Another 2 parts, natural resources and waste management, which contains mining technologies, recycling of recovery technologies, and the last part, innovative technologies and industrial processes, advanced materials and composites, nanotechnologies, sensors, ICT and geoinformation, printed electronics, automation and robotics of technological processes, photonics, recreation technologies, and marine technologies as well. So this graph shows the process of monitoring of these areas. It's very closely tied to the process of entrepreneurial discovery. So we're looking at what's happening in our economy and what happens globally. We try to monitor this and update the project accordingly in order to achieve our goals. We established 3 bodies: a steering committee coordinating activities, a consultative group on NSSs. It's a body composed of representatives of central administration and regional administration, and it's the platform for exchange of experiences and information on projects, innovative projects implemented, results of operational programs, both at the central and regional level, like Horizon 2020, regional OPs.
I trzecie gremium,
And finally, we have
najważniejsze dla samego procesu.
the most important body for the process itself. These are working groups on national smart specializations. We have such group for each of the specializations.
Gremium to odpowiada za
And this
definiowanie
forum
obszarów.
is responsible for defining areas, pointing to the R&D potential in individual areas. The groups also define objectives which shall then be monitored. They carry out SWOT analysis and they point to barriers to development.
W celu
In order to update and verify what has been defined already, PARP carries out activities under the SMART panel, which consists of interviews aiming at pointing to the areas which are then studied under SMART Lab, focus groups composed of representatives of business and science, which fine-tune the areas which could be new smart specializations. And what is crucial for the process and the economic impact are partnerships. This is not a body, it's the result of cooperation. On one hand, smart specializations are simply implemented in projects, in ROPs or smart growth operational programs, but there's also a number of initiatives which are a positive result of all the activities, like international cooperations, thematic partnerships attached to the European Union, and also what we are going to affect at the regional level, which is cooperation in the areas which are consistent across regional and central level, and also some financial engineering from smart growth. What you could be interested in is the relationship between smart specializations and clusters. In the process of selecting specializations, we carried out qualitative analysis. We took into account existing cooperation potential, and we looked at all clusters operating in Poland. What you see in the slide is how key national clusters are in line with some of our national smart specializations. So one could say that in fact the synergy is at 100%. The most advanced synergy is in transport and biotechnologies. And we focus on internationalization of clusters. One of the criterions is for the clusters to be in line with the objectives of national smart specialization. A little more on synergy. Most of the representatives of key clusters take part in our working groups, so we try to ensure that there is adequate flow of information. And the synergy of smart specialization and key enabling technologies. Shortly about what CATS are. This is an EU initiative which pointed to certain areas of technology which were to ensure dynamic development of the EU. These are cross-cutting technologies present in many sectors, and their specificity is that they're very R&D intensive and very capex consuming. So in technological areas, we can find micro and nanotechnologies, photonics, advanced materials, and at this slide we're trying to show the consistency of topics. When working on the technological foresight, KETs were taken into account as certain guidelines in defining future technologies in Poland. So by the nature of things, there is a synergy here. When it comes to support for entrepreneurs at the level of the European Union,
gremia jak centra technologiczne KEC.
Technological centers for KETs were proposed. These are centers in each of the member states which are to provide support for business, provide support for representatives of MSC which want to develop KETs, and these centers are to support them. So in order to be a technological center, you must meet certain criteria. We have 6 such entities in Poland. And now for the final slide, what is the impact of smart specialization on our society and economy? What we have already observed. For us, it's primarily the strengthened cooperation between the regional and central level through the exercise. We were able to see that this cooperation really exists. We exchange data, we exchange information, we meet at different fora dedicated to smart specialization, and we will also try to establish a project pipeline for joint projects. Thanks to the monitoring and entrepreneurial discovery system, we update development priorities on an ongoing basis, and we want to focus on areas when there is a bottom-up approach and bottom-up impulse. Concentration of public funds is another area. Concentration of public funds on selected areas. We want to support areas which for which there is a market demand, and this was taken into account when drafting the strategy for responsible development, when we defined flagship projects, where there's also a synergy. And the last but not least, cooperation of representatives of businesses, science, and the implementation of joint projects, selection criteria for such a cooperation, but it really exists. Well, and that's basically it.
Dziękuję bardzo za to wprowadzenie.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Our panel today is entitled CATS and SS, Theory and Practice, History of Implementation, Results and Future of Smart Specializations and Good Practices Resulting therefrom.
Krótko mówiąc,
very briefly, during the discussion today, we'd like to discuss, because the clusters are drivers of competitiveness and innovation, these are a support tool for the sector of key enabling technologies. But is this the fact? What are the experiences of Polish and international clusters? How the idea of CATS stimulates the development of clusters. We invited guests from the Netherlands and Lithuania, as we would like to see this in the international context, in the contents of the EU, which will also discuss internationalization. So what are the key questions that we would like to ask during this discussion? These are following. Are clusters the instruments for support of KETs and SSs? Were CATS strengthened through activities of clusters? What are the experiences in this area? And we will ask our panelists about this. What are the conclusions? Are these activities, do they make sense? Have they made sense? And what would the direction for development of clusters be? The second area, which is very important for discussions from the point of view of our topic, is the issue of the role of human capital in establishing and development of clusters. This is crucial for activities of clusters. And the issue related to the future and development development of clusters, because the environment is changing, the context of activities of cluster is changing, and we would like to see and hear what is your opinion about this, how do you perceive these problems, and how do you want to face them. We have invited 4 experts to our panel. Wilma Puriene from Lithuania. She's also an expert from ClusterFY. Anu Manikam from the Netherlands, representing, she's a researcher of cluster dynamics and regional developments at the University of Groningen. She's also an expert of ClusterFY. Tomasz Nasiłowski, the CEO of Infotech. The company is the member of Photonics and Fiber Optics Cluster, and Marek Świeczkowski, Logistics and Transport Cluster North-South Coordinator of the cluster, CEO of the board of this cluster. Some topics that we will talk about have been referred to in our previous discussions, the issue related to barriers, the support system, financing for clusters. Before we go to our discussions, and I consulted our panelists when preparing to this discussion, and each of the panelists wanted to enrich their presentation, so they prepared some PowerPoints. To start with, I would like to ask Wilma Puriene for a presentation of CATS in the context of the European Union. This will be a continuation of the introduction made by the Ministry, but from the point of view of the European Union. This will be a few slides, so I think it's worth starting the discussion from.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Marek, for introduction. And yes, I will briefly introduce the overview of the key enabling technologies in the Europe and how they can contribute to the cluster development and promotion. So, just Justina already told a bit about the key enabling technologies, that they are cross-cutting technologies that can impact the industry and how restructurize the industrial basis. And in the Europe, it considered as a building bridge among the research and the business. And it can increase the capacity of the Europe's, of the region, of the local business and clusters. And the clusters can be the platform where the key enabling technologies can be employed by the joint forces. So the main areas that are described in the European Union, it's 6 one, and the last year the 7 was like added dual use of product, service, and technologies. Is based that key enabling technologies are mostly embedded in all high added value products that can be usually used multiplied for societal and for military purposes. As we all know, in the military, the most innovation are developed, and most of them can be enabled in the societal life. So, a bit of statistic. So, 69 regions in the Europe were surveyed, and they identified 96 priority areas that are related with the CATS, and made those priority areas at the smart specialization areas for ERDF funding. So how European Commission imagines the smart specialization impact and contribution to the industrial modernization. So mainly is the support for regional smart specialization participants, so cluster organization, SMEs, business, science, and other networks that are supported and guided by the regional authorities and ministries with the funding opportunities and support instruments. And the industry among them, which is deploying innovation with the CATS, digital transformation, resource efficient technologies, and service innovation. And based on that, European Commission hopes that the smart specialization will prioritize the potential, industrial potential, and the research potential, working for the better prosperity of the region and of the country. So, what are the trends that are now making the most impact on the industry and on the employment of the new technologies and innovation in the industry? So, these are the digitalization and the related topic as big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, or everything smart manufacturing, robotization, and all digitalization technologies that have to be applied by the industry, that the industry would be on time with the whole development of the world. So also another point is natural resources and social and economical challenges like climate change, environmental issues, aging population, that are also encourage industry and research to seek for innovation and to find out solutions, how to solve those challenges that the whole world and the Europe and the regions are facing nowadays. The technological convergence. When the cross-cutting technologies and cross-sectoral collaboration, especially related to the clusters and SMEs, are starting collaboration activities, so those technologies merging and in that impacting the new evolvement and burns of the other technologies that also create possibilities for better employment and for creating solutions, innovative solutions. Regional political problems. So, as we're saying, regionalization of value chain. So, regions are also facing the societal and economical challenges that are very important for the region to prosper and to be more competitive. And the regional clusters, especially industry and clusters, can also help regional authorities to manage and to solve those challenges by providing new solutions based on employed innovation and key enabling technologies. And the last one, but not the least, the human resources, how we can manage to prepare the employees and our human resources to work in this digital world, digital industry, in digital markets, digital manufacturing companies and producers, how they can be able to work and to compete with the robots. So, by cross-sectoral collaboration, because it offers new knowledge combinations and innovation. It can offer also the new value chains for the industries, for the new products, and also the diversified specialization. When the narrow sectoral approach, it's no longer the competitive advantage, and the diversity of the competences and cross-cutting application of technologies is now becoming more and more important for the industry, especially for the industry. And clusters can work as a platform for combination of various competences and various specializations. Why clusters? So it's a very old slide from the Innobarometer, but it shows that companies that are in clusters, they are more eager to collaborate. They are more eager to apply innovations. They are more eager to collaborate with the research. They are also patenting and registering more patents and trademarks. So this is the platform where companies are more active on collaborative activities than they are doing this by alone. So some cluster facilitation initiative from the European Commission in the COSME program was in one of those was in a sub-measure. So this measure was dedicated for promotion of new industrial value chain with the combination of the and employment of cross-sectoral and cross-regional collaboration. That was the first initiatives that encourage clusters to collaborate among each other using the diversified competences, and that is the purpose to raise for emerging industries. A bit of statistics from the calls, and just to see the areas of the cluster collaboration projects for development of new industrial value chains. And the second measure of the European Commission was European Strategic Cluster Partnership for using cluster platform to help SMEs to internationalize and increase their capacity, and also to reach foreign markets beyond the EU. So it's both those slides can show you that it's almost very similar industrial and sectoral focus was of those two calls. So what does it mean, those emerging markets? So it's called new niches or new markets with a new value chain or restructurized value chain, when the collaboration of the cross-sectoral cluster collaboration can impact them. And mostly in those emerging industry, the key enabling technologies are the driving force of those. So those are listed the most common ones, and according to the emerging market report made by European Commission. And why clusters can impact and contribute to the promotion and development of the emerging markets. Because mostly more mature clusters are working in this emerging markets areas, and they are creating more than 54 million jobs. The Gazelle's clusters employ on average 35 people in one cluster. Also, the salaries are higher than in other workplaces. And the 40% of the emerging industries activities are concentrated in the 20% of the Europe's regions that have the cluster excellence and more mature clusters. So just brief recommendation maybe.
Okay, dziękujemy bardzo może za to takie jak gdyby
Thank you very much for kind of in-depth introduction. So several aspects have been introduced, especially this international aspect. This is cross-cooperation. This is really crucial, but I'd like to ask a question about the experience in this context. I mean, I'd like to ask the clusters here represented, mainly first Marek Świerkowski from Logistics and Transport Cluster North-South, to discuss their prior experiences, which results you obtained, and successes or barriers. What about your international cooperation? Did it exist? Was it of importance for the cluster and for strengthening the CAT sector and, I mean, the key enabling technologies? Did these activities made sense? Did they make sense, and were they successful? So these are the questions first to Marek Świeczkowski, but I will ask a similar question to Anu Minikvam and Tomasz Nasiłowski to Anu, because I know that you were involved in the research on Energy Valley, which was really very extensive research. This is the Energy Valley in the Netherlands. And to Mr. Wasikowski, how do such aspects look from the viewpoint of the company, which is a member of the cluster? So, okay, let's start with Marek Świeczkowski, as we agreed on. So thank you very much. I'm very happy to welcome everyone who's attending today's meeting. I think it's a great opportunity to discuss clusters' possibilities and possibilities of CATs and the links between CATs. And, well, we should also answer the question how such policy should develop. So, at the beginning, I'd like to refer to what colleagues said previously during the previous discussion panel, because we must agree with the fact that if clusters have such serious tasks, as you saw in the previous presentation, clusters have such possibilities, and they are responsible for creating innovation, for cooperation between the business and the scientific sector, and for creating international cooperation. So I also am in favor of the argument put by Mr. Krystowski, that they therefore must get funding from national and international funds. So let me explain it, giving you an example. If there is no such funding, if clusters develop, as one of the preceding mentions said, strictly on a commercial basis, we may face a paradoxical situation. Then, for example, in Poland, a big country, we would have just one big cluster, like a concern, which would focus, I don't know, 500 or 1,000 companies, because it would cope very well, it could somehow go forward, whereas the remaining clusters will disappear, unfortunately, for financial reasons. They would not become successful. So then there is a possibility then there will be kind of natural barrier to the development of these key technologies that we'd like to have, because we shouldn't have such a situation that there is just 1, 2, or 3 clusters. Let me tell you that at the moment we have just 16 key clusters. So in my opinion, I mean, as regards key clusters that develop dynamically, there should be about 50 here if we were to compare our country with other countries. So, but the issue of funding is so important, therefore. So getting back to our discussion, to the issues connected with specializations and other matters that have been mentioned, and mainly success stories. With your permission, let me present one major project that we are implementing under Horizon 2020. This is the project which is a success story, we may say so at least. It deals with technologies connected with beam technology development, and these technologies appear in the marine and port technologies, and we would like, by modeling beam technologies, we would like to prepare terminals. These could be strictly sea terminals or the so-called dry ports, harbors. So here our cluster is a partner in the project. The project is delivered by a big consortium of 14 companies, including the leading company from Spain, IDP. So the project has some objectives which we set at the beginning of it. So the project duration is 3 years, and therefore these goals, these objectives are clearly set, and scientists are working on some solutions and optimization of connections between train transport to and from sea harbors and to the dry harbors. And here we are showing the composition of our consortium. It's an international consortium. There are some Spanish, German, Italian companies. We are from Poland, and we are the cluster, transport cluster, logistic and cluster north-south, and we are implementing the part which is connected with dissemination of information. Its title is information, dissemination and information, in fact. So here we act mainly based on social media. We are responsible for the website, for social media channels, and the editing of electronic brochures, articles. Everything is based or is focused on the transfer of information on what's going on in the project, how far it goes. There are tweets, obviously, links, other channels, intermodal channels, also brief brochures describing what's going on in the project, a newsletter, and some international publications in trade press, and we are now preparing ourselves for publishing Baltic Transport Journal. And another important issue is also speeches at international conferences at which project participants inform the public what's going on in the project, which benefits it gives. Therefore, there are lots of international conferences, and of course, all partners take part in it, those that are responsible for its dissemination. We plan more conferences, as you've seen, so they are very specific topics. Now, getting back to KPIs, the key performance indicators, as we set in our project, they are of great importance because they enable us to introduce specific things that we want to achieve, and they are for us very important. And we focus on it, and the whole really project focuses on it. So we mean here optimization, some kind of ensuring economic performance as well. And well, we point out to the things that the project really is responsible for. And now we have more KPIs, and recently we discussed it at a meeting in Brussels. There was a meeting with the representative of the European Commission, and we presented some specific indicators for the project during that meeting. So I think that the project that we have here could be called a success because its value is 3 million euros, and we as Poland have been taking part in the project, and we are learning really, because in fact very few Polish companies are on the horizon, and therefore we are kind of gateway to what can be done further in the future. And I think this is an example of how and where we use KPIs and how we really may take them into account and get prepared for them. So there's been quite a small success that we have achieved. So thank you very much. And I think at the last slide we have questions, and I'm sure that we will get back to the questions, and we'll ask our panelists here with us to ask questions, and possibly at the end. But first, let me ask, do you have a feeling that you also have developed CATS and smart specialization thanks to your activity in clusters, and how does this dimension look in your activities? And then I will ask the same question to Anu and Tomasz. So first, your answer.
We, as a cluster, are very active at two levels of smart specialization. The first is the national level. We are active in the working group environment-friendly transport system, and this group is attached to the ministry, and we are an active member. And the technologies which are important to us as a cluster, we promote at this platform. We, as a cluster, we're not only responsible for development of the transport and logistics sector as a huge sector which is connected to different activities, sea transport, rail transport, road transport, but we try to introduce new technologies, state-of-the-art technologies. The ones most important to us are electric ships. This is where Poland could get a competitive advantage. There is a plan in Poland related to electromobility, and part of this electromobility is electromobility of ships. So this is where we could develop our industry on the basis of Polish shipyards, and this is the space where we could play an important role, not only in Europe, but globally, because we have some experience already. The company from our cluster was a company to design the first electric ferry operating at a Norwegian fjord. So this is an example, and we also have a port marine specialization as a regional specialization. Well, we'll certainly go back to this, but we're short of time. We touched on electromobility, which is of course related to energy. So what were the experiences from the energy clusters, Energy Valley from the Netherlands? Anu, please tell us. We have the presentation. It will be easier for us to understand the issue.
Microphone.
Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and also to ClusterFY for this, I think, very important event. You know, when you hear, we've been having so much information the whole morning, and I want to react to every single thing, like my colleagues here. What I promised when I talked to Marek is to, today, at least in this first presentation, to use the Energy Valley example to show how the cluster developed, because I said we will talk about cluster developments, and then during that process I hope to show how CATS is related. Because I think that from the discussions we talked today, I think this is very important, and I think this is very relevant for a lot of us sitting in this room, that, and Vilma also touched on it, it's about the restructuring of our industries and our existing sectors. So we, in the Netherlands, we are sitting on the largest reserve of gas, and we also have, oil, but especially gas is a big. It was built our economy for a long time, but what happened is that it also caused us a lot of problems. But I think I'm sitting in front of my own. Am I going to follow?
Okay. It's fine.
Okay. On the right, actually behind me, it says that we started out as a energy sector. So we are organized as a sector, and I think most of us will recognize this. But because of a number of developments, for example, the EU internal market, the liberalization of the energy sector, we were forced in a way to become a cluster. So this, I think, is a very important starting point, that there must always be a very important need. And very often it is external factor that makes us to become or to develop into a cluster. Sometimes it's policy. In our case, it's, yes, policy, but a need because we had to move and change. So you had a very traditional cluster. This is already in the ninth, I have to think about it, this more than 10 years now, but we already started with the triple helix, and we started, but what was problem was that the old dominant players were still determining how to go. And when you have that, they still will build on their old infrastructure. We have a huge gas infrastructure that goes right into northern Italy and to some of France. What you see is that their solutions were also very big answers. How do we solve the depletion of gas? How do we deal with this problem? They come up with big windmills on the sea. We come up with huge solar parks. And this is, of course, also necessary, but what is, I think, also interesting is that there are things that happen outside of the cluster, and I think that this is what I want to start to bring in. Some people mentioned it this morning, that there is a world going on, and in energy, what we have seen in the Netherlands is that there are a lot of people are encouraged to put solar panels, but they started to also organize themselves, and we now have villages or neighborhoods that are coming together to build their own solar parks or their own solar energy solutions, or having windmill parks. Farmers, and this is also very interesting, it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it is.
The
It's
cat
pointer.
is working. So what is also interesting is that we've seen that more and more we suddenly have farmers who are either because of the requirement of the EU policy for biofuels, have started changing their crops so that they can benefit from this additional income and resources. But what is also happening is that they are starting to become producers of energy. So a lot of these farms are now putting a lot of solar panels, and they're becoming producers. I buy my energy from a farmer 50 kilometers from my region instead of the traditional energy. So what is happening in the Netherlands is that because of these developments, we find that the cluster organization has to adjust to the changes that are happening outside. So they started with digital communities, but in the meantime, what we've seen is that they needed to move, and there is now a big move that Energy Valley Foundation, which is the cluster organization, has been asked by policy actually to merge with our Energy Academy, which is 2 universities, but also with the private university, and now they're called the Energy Coalition. Okay, interesting. In some ways, what was even more interesting in our region, and some of our partners here, was at the entrance, which is a testing facility that has been established by our university, and it happened because some of the people in the practice came to us and said, we are really nervous about what is going on. We are very nervous that we are too late to make the transition. Mm-hmm. So they came to the university, or 3 or 4 partners come together and say, we have to do something, and they started this thing called Entrance with one container, but today we have this very beautiful building. And what is important about this building is that businesses are coming together to realize that business is not as usual, they have to change. So the urgency to change is a very important driver for clusters to work. And what has happened, you see, is that now instead of just having the traditional members, energy companies, we now have banks, we have construction industry, for example. So there are all sorts of new developments coming into this entrance, which was a test facilities, but in some ways has become a very important cluster in its own right, even though it was never set up as a cluster. It's an open innovation testing facility. Mm-hmm. And what you see here is that their role has changed. They find that they have to educate people about energy transition. So they are taking on experiments. So the other thing I have not heard today a lot of is students. Because transitions and restructuring of industry is a very expensive thing, we use a lot of students to do a lot of the work. And this is also important because by doing that, we already are coming to the human capital question that you were going to ask me about, that we are already involving them in these new, usually digital technologies, advanced technologies, because what is happening in energy is the smart grids. Mm-hmm. It's because we have these new digitalization that we are finding that we have new business models. So our students, for example, are developing new energy services. They're developing apps. How can you create new types of entrepreneurship to deal with this new energy transition or the new landscape? So you see here that suddenly a cluster like Entrance has taken on a completely different and extended role from what it began. And well, this is just some of the activities that they even have, not just for businesses, because the whole day I'm hearing a lot about connecting businesses amongst themselves, businesses with university. But what is very important, because of the developments in the societal transition, it's also connecting clusters to the society and students. I'm sorry, I think I went the wrong way. And as a last slide on this, just to say what's also really interesting, because we had a big success, and I think this morning we talked about it, when you have success, you attract success. What's happened is that in this test facilities, which is on the campus where both our universities are, we suddenly now have a number of new testing facilities related to entrance, which is heat and appliance testing. So companies can bring in their equipment to already to be preparing for the new technologies that are coming. There's also a whole test center for new type of construction, and because we have earthquakes because of our gas, we now need to suddenly, in a very big hurry, create new types of construction technology. So you have new technologies coming in, and the very last one is the virtual. We've become a 5G testing area, the whole of the region. So this is a little bit of a slightly different take on your question, but I think what is important is to understand that there must be a need, there's an urgency, whether to showcase your own need, the branding, I think the questions we talk about, that I think that the key enabling technologies will be there, but if there's no need, if there's no urgency from outside, we're not going to be able to leverage it or use it.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. From this presentation, we see how important it is to commit social capital and how important it is that people are committed, people who want to bring in new values in cluster activities. This has been said very clearly here. Anu also mentioned, which is very important, that the need is also a driver of activities, not only what has been defined as KETs, but the need for new developments is crucial. I would like to ask Tomasz Nasiłowski, please tell us now, how does it look like from the point of view of a company active in a cluster? We had examples here. We had examples of clusters activities, but what's the point of view of a company acting in a cluster? Where does cluster help and where it does not?
Witam Państwa serdecznie, nazywam się Tomasz Nasiłowski.
My name is Tomasz Nasiłowski. I represent Infotech company, and in particular I represent the cluster of fiber optics, and I would like to share with you
obszary naszej działalności, którym jest fotonika.
A few words about what we do, which is photonics. Photonics may be a mysterious word for some of you, for some others not, but I would like to address key enabling technologies in particular, and I would like, quite a lot has been said about clusters, but what are key enabling technologies? Our cluster focuses on one of such technologies, and here the first comment is that very often in Poland it's translated as supporting technology. But these are not solely supporting technologies, but these are key technologies which facilitate development, or without which the industry shall not develop in future. So they're not only support, they enable. And I also think that this mistranslation could point to the fact that at the time it was first translated, people did not understand how important the KETs were. So what is KET? I explain CAT as a mature scientific domain which is introduced to industry. So this directly means the necessity to cooperate with science. So where the science is mature and it developed technology, it can be introduced into industry. So someone said before that EU points to several such technologies, and photonics is one of them. So in order to be aware what a KET should be, I would like to ask you to think about going back 50 years, beginning of 1970s, and this is where the development of electronics starts, the second part of 20th century. So, if we, for example, in the end of 1960s, one of the bosses of IBM said that he sees a global market for about 10 computers. This was a person responsible for development of technologies. So this shows how an insider could be mistaken. So in the half of 20th century, electronics was a KET, but today no one can imagine any sector of industry without electronics. If someone does not use electronics, they're just not there. It's obsolete, it's archaic. So it's not only us, but also scientists and entrepreneurs, large companies selected several such technologies, which are key enabling technologies, which in about 50 years, without which in 50 years industry shall not exist. Surely, some of you remember the times when Poland was very indebted. Poland was led then by Edward Gierek. This was under communist times. At one of the meetings with scientists from technical universities, he said, "I wish your semiconductors become full conductors." That's demonstrating his ignorance and how important it is that persons which are crucial to development of the countries are aware of what key technologies are, where we should invest. Someone asked about the criteria for development of clusters, so that how to select the key clusters. I think it would be good to have a simple exercise and think, if we used the same criteria in 1970, would we develop clusters around heavy industry, or would we develop electronics? It's hard to say. I'm not familiar with the details of the selection process for clusters right now, but if a criterion is the turnover, electronics in 1970 had negligible turnovers, but it was worth investing into at the time, which is obvious today. So it would be a shame if we skipped some key technologies, because it would then be difficult to escape the trap of middle development. We are now in this trap because we invested in heavy industry rather than electronics. There is no highly developed country now across the world that does not have well-developed electronics industry. Probably in future it will not be electronics, it will be nanoelectronics or photonics. So this was the reason for which I decided to start a company and develop photonics. Earlier, I was a scientist, I was a professor at the university in Brussels. At some point, I decided to go back to Poland and use my experience, because I knew that photonics was indeed interesting for the industry. And very quickly, I realized that one single company cannot do a lot when designing a new technology. Many people from industry do not even understand photonics, so we had to build a group of companies and scientific institutions where this technology was developed in order to be able to convince business as a group, to raise awareness of existence and the value of photonics for the industry. What is the added value of photonics? And now, what is very important, the next panel will be on Internet of Things, digitalization, Industry 4.0, to develop this because it's very important. This will be the foundation for new economy. But it's very important whether we shall be consumers of technologies designed by someone else, like we are consumers of internet. We use internet, but shall we be able to co-design such technologies? Shall we be able to manufacture co-processors of the future? And this will be how we develop new technologies, how we will contribute to Internet of Things, or shall we just use these technologies? Shall we be forced to buy equipment from companies that are developing in some other regions of the world?
So I have prepared several slides, so if possible now, I know we've run out of time, thank you very much, really. What you've said shows us what's happening from the viewpoint of the company which is building something which also uses the knowledge as is created under this cluster, and you also mentioned that we should co-finance such areas and subsectors which at the beginning somehow do not bring great development value, and therefore we are somehow lagging behind because such activities were not started. And activities within clusters are very good from the viewpoint of the organization. Obviously, it is so. But let me now get to the international level and ask Madam Vilma how international cooperation between clusters looks from the viewpoint of integration, I mean international value chain. What I mean is that we should, in several words, say what is your experience from ClusterFY. And there was also a question to Anu, the same question, but I've already been informed that we have to come to an end. So first this question is asked to Vilma and also other panelists, how you see the development of clusters in the CATS context when Horizon 2020 is over. How do you see the next steps? Okay, we will have to do it in, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes. I know the time is very limited, but Vilma, first about experiences from ClusterFY.
So mainly we are here thanks to ClusterFY project, international one, where the 7 international partners, 8 international partners are joining forces to empower and to prosper the cluster developments and integration into international value chains. And we think that the key enabling technologies is the key tool and key issue for bringing clusters into international arena and helping clusters by promoting them to combine the competences, and join the forces to employ the key enabling technologies and development of the new products and services. So in this international ClusterFY project, we have 5 regional, national, and local authorities that are able to influence and impact on the existing support tools that are dedicated for supporting and promotion of the cluster's development. So we during the cluster project, we are visiting the countries. We are sharing good practice. We are discussing with the local stakeholders. We are doing the international conference with the international experts. So we are learning now, and based on those experience and practice, after the project ends, we will prepare the 8 action plans for national cluster developments, and also the joint European recommendation for European cluster developments.
To będą te wnioski z realizacji tego projektu.
Sorry.
They would be the outputs, the conclusions from
Yes,
the project.
This is the outputs.
Yes. Anu, a jak ty widzisz ten problem?
No, how do
związany z
you
międzynarodową współpracą
see
klastrów?
this
Bo
issue
mamy
connected
tak,
with
zmieniający się
international
troszkę
cooperation of
środowisko,
clusters? Because
zmieniający się
of the
kontekst,
environment is changing,
bardzo
the
szybki
context
jak
is
gdyby
changing,
rozwój,
the very
również
rapid
myśli
development
technologicznych
of
i tego, co
technological
wiąże się z
thought and
kacami.
everything
Jak,
which is connected with
czy jest
cats.
potrzebny
So,
taki, generalnie rzecz biorąc,
do we need
współpraca
generally
międzynarodowa?
cooperation at the
Ona,
international level?
w tych naszych wypowiedziach,
I mean,
jak gdyby się przebijało to,
we've
że jednak
already
tak,
mentioned
ale jak to
that,
wygląda
yes, of
dzisiaj
course
z
it is.
punktu widzenia
But
ciebie jako
yeah,
badacza
how do you
tego
see
problemu?
it as a researcher into the topic?
Well, I think what is really important, just last week, the European Union said that the circular economy is going to be a very important leading strategic choice for the future. So if I take that as a starting point, then I think that that's a good way to think. We cannot solve these problems only on the regional level and not on the national level, and a lot of it has to be on the transnational and European level. And especially when you're talking about developments of new technologies, but also transforming industry or all types of, so from fossil fuel based to electric shipment. Just take an example. I think there is so much the speed of change that we need to really collaborate to get the speed of change that we need, because otherwise we will be lagging or even more lagging compared to our competitors in other parts of the world. So I don't think it's a choice about internationalization. I think it's a matter of that we need to really work together and to push this. And I think this is where ClusterFY is also hoping to contribute towards this, that even as we go and start to understand all the partner regions and identify what their needs are, and we are hoping that there will be some sort of marriage of convenience or of coming together, that perhaps that we can, the things we hear today, we can bring to see when we go to our next partner meeting in Sweden, say, hey, but we know there's a very important initiatives here, or whether it's photonics or whether it's the shipping or this morning on ICT. How can we connect this to what's going on in Sweden or in Netherlands? And I think that this is important, and this brings me back to a concept that is used in the European Union. It's called the projects of common interest. It's something that already exists, usually in neighboring countries, but I think that this notion that we have to identify common projects to accelerate our ability to push enabling technologies even faster, but also to commercialize it. So this is one part, and I just want to add one thing, that creating new business models is a very important part of this. Somebody talked about service innovation. I think we must not underestimate that it's not just about only the top sectors, it's not just only about top technologies, but it's also about every single layer of the economy. So there was a lady this morning who was talking about traditional crafts. But key enabling technologies like digitalization will help them to bring higher value to how they present their products, how do they reach markets. So I think we also must not forget that when we are talking about key enabling technologies, it's not only about the top end, even though that is very important. It could be the next push like electronics was, but it's really across the whole board.
Bardzo dziękuję. Czy zgadzacie się Państwo również tak?
Thank you very much. Do you agree with that? I mean, we have to now sum up our discussion. We are coming to an end to the discussion. But what about from the viewpoint of ours? How should international cooperation look after Horizon 2020? Marek, could you say a few words about it? Of course, we must agree that international cooperation, transnational cooperation is of crucial importance. We all agree, even in building a new business model in this context. Yes, because that was mentioned in the summary, we must say. Of course, yes, we are now operating the environment of new startups, new companies, innovation. So I think this kind of permeation of clusters of thoughts and innovation is crucial. After 6 years of activity within the cluster, we have 110 members, and they involve universities and companies, and therefore they absolutely are targeted export, and they want to cooperate.
For us as clusters, European partnerships, strategic partnerships are important. We are member of one. It's called MOVE. It's connected to our logistics sector, but also there are other values which we can bring in, which we can contribute. Recently, we were invited to Belarus, where certain structures similar to clusters are established. We were invited there as experts from such structures and non-such structures and modeling, and I had the pleasure to sign a letter of intent together with 25 other companies to the effect that we will assist Belarus. So we feel this responsibility. We were helped by the EU and European countries, and we are to relay the good experiences further to Belarus and Ukraine. I think it's a true example of international cooperation. So I do encourage everyone, not only clusters, but also companies, organizations, the authorities. There was a representative of the government at the meeting in Belarus, so they attach a lot of importance to this. So we should show the way, we should lead the way. So would you be interested, Tomasz, from the point of view of an enterprise? Well, we're also a member of the European Partnership in Photonics, because development of new technologies calls for cooperation. You cannot have all competences. You have to have your own competence. You have to know what you have to offer. We have, for example, leaders in special fiber optics. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have to finish this discussion. It was very interesting. But I'm under an obligation to ask you if there are any questions from the floor. I have a question. Which country was the leading country when applying to Horizon 2020? The question to Mr. Świeczkowski. We know that we had a marginal number of applicants from Poland. And a question to the lady from the Netherlands. I did not quite understand. You said we were sitting on the largest gas resources, and you said that Dutch infrastructure brought this gas to southern France and northern Italy. Let me answer first. The Spaniards from Barcelona were the leaders of the project. They animated. So we are a partner, and the Spaniards are... the question asked without the mic, so... The second question directed to Amo about gas resources.
Yes, but I didn't understand what the question was. Yes, we sit on the largest gas.
Siedzimy na największych zasobach gazu, owszem.
But the gas is finishing, and also there was a major problem. The gas was creating earthquakes, so there's some major problems about how do we deal with this, and we needed to, it helped with the climate change, we needed to get away from fossil. So even as we had gas infrastructure right across even to some parts of Europe, on the one hand, we look for solutions that can use those infrastructures. So we look for biogas, green, synthetic gas. So on the one hand, but it's not enough, because also consumers and the needs of sustainable societies is pushing us to look for solutions not just on gas base, and not just to use those resources. Of course, you must use it, but we need to expand it and look at new solutions, look outside the box. I don't know if that's helpful. Yeah?
Tak, dziękuję bardzo. Proszę Państwa.
Thank you. Yes, that answers the question. Well, we're really short of time, and I'm shown the time symbol by the organizers. I would like to thank our panelists, particularly our international guests for very extensive presentations. I would also like to thank the gentlemen for sharing their views, and I would like to thank the audience for listening and asking questions. I think the conclusions are optimistic, and they give food for thought when it comes to internationalization. Thank you for your attention, and thank you.